let's crack on. And my colleague Ashley's in the background there, and she will be admitting people as we go through. So welcome to everybody. My name is Katie King, and I am a published author on artificial intelligence in business and the CEO of a company called AI in Business. Website aiinbusiness.co.uk, and we've got the next hour and a half, depending on how long people will stay on for the Q&A, but certainly for a good hour plus to talk you through how you can harness AI for competitive advantage. And I have the real pleasure of working with Petro and Iro and Marina, his colleagues, and from Foundtech Solution. So I will introduce Petro in a moment properly, but just for myself initially, we're both going to be presenting to you this morning. And my background is 30 years in business consulting. I spent a year my book was published last year on AI in marketing, but it spans not just marketing, but particularly sales and human resources as well. And they're not just my words. I'm not teaching people to code. I'm teaching people how to apply AI to business. So it's a collection of case studies from around the world of incredible people, major brands, technology startups and disruptors, regulators, politicians, and so on. And it touches not just application, but major macro business issues of trust, transparency, ethics, AI for good, equality, and so on. Bottom bullet point there is I am on a task force for the UK's all-party parliamentary group, and we hear evidence all around the world from visitors, again, academics, business people. We're running them virtually at the moment, had around 3,000 people on one of the recent ones, and it's incredible. It's great profile. We get access to companies in China, in the United Arab Emirates, in mainland Europe, and it's just incredible, and I feel quite privileged to be able to have that cutting edge information and access to people. So working with the team at Foundtech, we're very well placed to help you from a consultative point of view in terms of actually outsourcing to us and so on, but we'll talk to you a little bit more about that as we go along. So I have the pleasure of introducing Petro first, because he is going to be sharing with you a background in AI and talking a little bit about the work that the team there do. He's the Chief Science Officer for Foundtech Solutions, and unlike me, does have a very technical background. He has a PhD in complexity sciences and is a very well-respected, peer-reviewed, published author in areas such as non-invasive diagnostics, biotech, and other sciences that interface with maths, and an inventor with patent applications in the fields of social engagement, education, and biotech. So we're really lucky to have him this morning, and I'm going to hand over to Petro now, who will share his screen and take us through the first part of the presentation.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, Katie. Let me know if you can see my screen. Excellent. As Katie mentioned, I'm Petros. I'm the Chief Science Officer of Foundtech Solutions. We're an AI B2B turnkey solutions consultancy. So we offer other businesses the opportunity to implement AI as part of their business, and we help them through that journey. My bit of the talk today with my colleague Katie is more of a technical component in artificial intelligence. I want to provide you with some definitions about artificial intelligence, the various categories of AI that you might have heard of, and we do some comparing and contrasting between the differences that exist there. What's the difference between AI and non-AI software? How is it part of our daily lives? And I want to conclude with giving you a flavor of how AI works in the background by going through a simple example that will help solidify what we've talked in the previous sections of the presentation, and why I personally think AI is not just a hype going away, because if major economic unions like the European Union are thinking about integrating their roadmap, then that means something as well. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce the first definition of artificial intelligence, which was defined by the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence, comprised of various individuals that work in the domain of artificial intelligence, that meet periodically, discuss the latest developments, and try to keep an updated definition that encompasses everything that is happening in this field. The actual definition itself is about 2 paragraphs long, but I think it can be neatly summarized in 3 bullet points. So artificial intelligence are systems that illustrate intelligent behavior by perceiving their environment, interpreting their environment, and actuating based on that interpretation to achieve a complex goal. Now I want to pause for a bit and go through the 3 bullet points to explain what that means. What does perceiving the environment mean for a software system or a hardware system that has a software engine as a brain? Well, it's all about the data. Software systems and hardware systems perceive instructions in the form of data. So when we're speaking about environment in the terms of artificial intelligence, we mean the data that describes something. The interpretation of the environment is the data analytic component that takes part of that artificial intelligence instance. And the actuating is the result of the computation. So that might be a prediction about what the data means, or an action that needs to be done about the data. And as said, intelligent systems can be both software. You can think of it about as the brains of a solution. Hardware, you can think about it as the body of the solution. A common example of both software and hardware may be the brains of an automobile car that has the ability to park itself. A more visual interpretation of the exact same definition is shown here. Now we can think about the environment as a closed system, or as a system that issues data. It could be a machine that manufactures something and we're monitoring the manufacturing process, and that obviously generates some data. We can either manually feed it or automatically feed it to the machine or to the AI system. But equally well, the AI system may be equipped with sensors such as camera or audio recording equipment that can capture the data of the process. So that's the interpretation of the data, the reasoning aspect, to arrive at a decision. For example, it could be looking at the process and deciding whether something that is being manufactured is of the quality and standard that is acceptable or not. The little levers here indicate that, the decision can have a physical effect if we want to, but it's not necessary. It might as well be a prediction that says, hey, someone needs to look at this, and there's a human intervention before something happens. Now that's quite complex to remember everything, so I like to think about it in a much more neat and summarized way. Artificial intelligence is systems that can simulate human reasoning. They can mimic human behavior. I think that definition captures the much more complex one, and it's much easier to remember. But what is artificial intelligence in general? Because it's a black box for many. And I think it's a black box even for people working in the field, because it's such a vast field. Actually, the ultimate goal of the field is to go towards artificial general intelligence, which is the ability of machines to reason like humans do. Humans can reason very well under many circumstances. You can have a human being part of a conversation and knowing how to respond. And then you can have a human, the same human person, seeing something and recognizing it as an animal or as a particular type of cat or dog. In our case, we're not at the point where we can have that general intelligence being embedded into a machine, or those strides are being made towards that goal. Where we're at is actually a small corner down at the right-hand side. So that's the little gray box where we are now, which looks small, but don't get me wrong, a lot of interesting things happen there. And we call that box artificial narrow intelligence. It's narrow in the sense that we actually provide the software or the machine the ability to behave like a human would do, but only under a particular context. In the examples given before, it could be the context of recognizing whether something has been manufactured is of good quality or not of good quality. Within artificial narrow intelligence, the most popular field is machine learning. It's a family or an umbrella term, if you like, of algorithms that are used for statistical reasons. So these kinds of algorithms are used in a sense that we provide many kinds of examples of wanted behavior that are used to train artificial intelligence systems. Now, if there's one thing that you should take away from this slide before it becomes a bit more complex, is this: artificial general intelligence is the goal. We are currently in domain of artificial narrow intelligence, and the most popular method of implementing artificial narrow intelligence is a group of algorithms known collectively as machine learning. Within that group, we have various other algorithms. You might have heard of terms like supervised learning, unsupervised learning, natural language, reinforcement learning, and transfer learning. Supervised learning is essentially teaching or a machine or an algorithm to behave in the same way as a human would do via example. We provide many examples of input data and the expected output data. Unsupervised learning is a class of algorithms that helps you put together data that seems has similar features, or clustering the data, if you like. Natural language are the group of algorithms that help us understand language and build language models. And technically, it's a supervised learning kind of subcomponent or subfamily, but we often refer to it separately because it deals with language. Reinforcement learning is teaching machines how to behave by rewarding them when they arrive at a good decision, or penalizing them when they arrive at a bad decision, and they learn through that means. Transfer learning instead is a relatively new concept where, as I said beforehand, we build these systems under a particular context and they behave quite well in that context, but maybe not so well in a different context. But if a new context is quite similar to the one that was originally used to train the algorithm, we can take that already trained algorithm and slightly adapt it such that it behaves well. As said, machine learning is not just the only thing, but it might be the most popular thing. Other things that happen in the domain of artificial narrow intelligence, which I think will also push us towards the artificial general intelligence limit, is knowledge representation, which is methods that are involved with building structured and easily accessible objects that contain data that could be useful for us when conducting an artificial intelligence solution. But I haven't talked anything about neural networks, and I'm sure you've heard about those. So where do neural networks appear in this domain here? So I think we need to peel back this high level classification a bit more. So I'll focus a bit on the three main things here: supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and natural language. And terms that you may have heard of is artificial neural networks, or deep learning, or deep neural networks. And all of these things are just algorithms or types of algorithms that fall under the supervised learning category. In unsupervised learning or clustering of data, you might have heard of things like principal component analysis if you have ever dwelled into this field, which are a bit more technical terms, or K-means. And in natural language, I'm sure that you all have heard of things like chatbots, conversational agents, language models, or more technical terms like word embeddings, which are all applications or ways of developing natural language models. So as you can see, it's a relatively complex, convoluted field because there's so many terms that are sometimes interchangeably used. But I hope right now you have a better understanding of where things lie in this map of AI. But we haven't talked about the differences of AI software versus non-AI software. The one thing that remains constant and the same is that you still need someone to sit down and program a few lines of code before it happens. But the difference is that non-AI software machines need to be programmed explicitly. That means a human operator needs to sit down. It needs to think about the potential of all possible rules and behaviors that a system needs to take into account before it does an action. So if you see X, do Y, but both X and Y need to be strictly defined by a human person in order to be able to mimic that human behavior if we're talking about artificial intelligence. Respectively, AI software doesn't need that explicit kind of rule-based approach, which is very hard and rigid. What we do in AI software instead, we come up with a model that would possibly describe the world and the environment, and we'll talk about that a bit more when we come to our example. But what we do is like, here is the model, here are some example data, and here's the expected output data. And through that showing of data to the algorithms that we previously just discussed, the supervised learning ones, the deep neural network ones, we let the model find the key information or the most important information and how it can come about and put that information together in order to give you that expected output. Why is that important? Well, because of that, because of what we've just said, non-AI software is quite rigid. So it's not adaptable to new context or new information. When new information comes to light or when some behavior was left out because it was not thought of at the beginning, a person needs to sit down again and rewrite all the rules. Conversely, AI software is actually quite adaptable to this new behavior. What we can do is that once we have our system trained and new examples come to light, we just show those new examples to the algorithms and the algorithms adapt in order to correspond to the new information. You can think about it as having a new context or moving into a new field or a new domain or having new instances. And you don't need to actually have someone sit down and think about all the rules again. So what does artificial intelligence generally look like? I think when I speak of artificial intelligence, the first thing that comes to mind is the rise of the machines and that robot will take us over. And this clip is definitely artificial intelligence here. So when we see a robot that is perceiving the environment, it jumps, it recognizes objects. So we can see, for example, it recognizes that there's some boxes that it needs to jump over. It processes that environment and it issues the command of jumping. And unless you're in the field of robotics or in the field of defense, that's a very, very, very myopic view of what AI is. AI is not just robots, and robots are not about to take us over, if you ask me. But actually, AI is everywhere around us with more common examples. Um, you have AI in your smartphone. You use your smartphone daily. You can actually talk to it. You can ask it, tell me what's next on my calendar, and it tells you what's next on your calendar. It understands your voice, interprets that, and tells you the relevant information. You use social media. In social media, you can have algorithms that help you tag images or suggest new friends for you. You can have a car that knows how to park itself, or you can have a navigation system in that car that helps you go from point A to point B by avoiding all that traffic. You can have AI algorithms in the health domain where they recognize and analyze X-ray scans and they can tell you whether you have broken bones. And that takes a lot of the human effort out of it, and it helps you arrive at a conclusion of what the optimal therapy is for you faster. Or even when you buy stuff online and you fill your cart with all the things that you want, there's suggestions that say, well, based on what you have here, you might also need A, B, C, and D. Those things are all artificial intelligence. So it's not a dystopian future after all. And actually, I think, probably even before joining today's seminar, you have probably used maybe 5 or 10 instances of AI without you being aware that it's AI working in the background. So I want to solidify everything that we've talked about by going through a simple example of an artificial intelligence instance. And the most common example that we can all relate to is the real estate estimator, because we've all seen how houses are. We live in one and we know how to describe them. So if the problem is, what is the right price if I'm selling my house or if I'm buying a house? Well, if you would do it in a conventional way, you would go to a real estate agent and provide him with information. That could be what's the covered spaces of the house, the numbers of rooms, the number of bathrooms, relevant other information like the area, but let's keep it simple for the moment. And let's just say that you can describe a house just using 3 components: covered spaces, number of rooms, and number of bathrooms. And I'm pretty sure that if you've given that information to any real estate agent that works in a particular area, would be able to provide you with a quote almost instantly because they have that experience. But in our world, we have an artificial intelligence system to train. So we tell the artificial intelligence systems, these are the three main components that I want you to keep in mind when you want to, when I want you to come up with a pricing formula. And we further tell it that, you know, these components can be additive. Actually, all of them can affect the final price. Bigger house means probably a bigger price. More rooms probably means a bigger price. More bathrooms means a bigger price. But what we don't have an idea about is how each of these separate components affects the final price. Or if you like, what is the weighting of those components towards the final price? How much of the covered space is important? How much are the number of rooms important in that final price? Are the number of bathrooms important? That's the model that we will provide our artificial intelligence with, and we will provide it furthermore with data. If we have previous data, which we can easily find in newspapers, for example, like the covered spaces, the number of rooms and the number of bathrooms and the going price, and we provide that data to the algorithm of supervised learning, like linear regression, then the algorithm will actually figure out the correct weighting, the terms here called W1, W2, and W3, and give us back a final price. Why is that important? Well, as I said, it's adaptable. Give it new information about a new area, you can come with a better fit about those weightings. Even if a real estate agent moves into a new area, they still wouldn't know the intricacies of that new area. But with data at hand, you can easily train a model. If you have a real estate agency and someone asks you for a quote, you can have that model working in the background and it would immediately issue a ballpark figure for that person that reaches out for you. Finally, I want to leave you with some thoughts why I think AI is not going away. And I think AI is not going away because all regions in the world have a roadmap, a plan for providing funding and marketing and opportunities in investment about developing AI further. But here are three paragraphs that are most relevant to EU, to the European Union, all taken from a recent white paper just published in February. Europe's current and future sustainable economic growth and societal well-being increasingly draws on the value created by data. Remember, data here is our interpretation of the world. AI is one of the most important applications of the data economy. Over the past year, funding has increased by 70% compared to previous periods, and there's 70 actions by the EU that are aimed to stimulate research, investment, market uptake, skills training, and international cooperation. And those are up to run up until 2027. With that, I'd like to leave the technical elements. Please do get in touch if you have more questions to ask. And I'd like to pass on the mic to my colleague Katie, which will approach the subject from the business point of view.
Thank you, Petro. So I will share my screen. For those of you that joined prior to, or sorry, since I sent the introductions earlier, just to reiterate, so Petro's just been talking through some really clear, really interesting definitions there of the family of AI, machine learning, and given us some great examples. I'm going to take that a couple of stages further by giving you more examples. I'll be speaking for about 15, 20 minutes max, and then what we'll do is we'll give you all a chance to speak. We'll ask you to type into the chat box and we'll have a really good Q&A. So, and also we might pose some questions to you as well regarding challenges currently and so on. So let me begin by, I don't need to set the scene and do the definitions. Petro has done that extremely well. But what I would like to say, and this is really backed up by all of the research in my book, as I mentioned, I spent a year talking to major vendors, dozens of technology disruptors all over the world in all different industry sectors, and the regulators, academics, and so on, people like Petro. What I would say came through for me really clearly is that, like many other new technologies, and you can see many of them here on the runway in this Gartner hype cycle, and where AI was very much on that ramp for the first few years. And this is a technology, this is a term that's been around for nearly 70 years, and we've been in 7 decades of what was described as an AI winter. And the reason it's been viable for the past few years is that we have the data after years of smartphone technology, the internet, and so on. And we have cheap processing power. So all of a sudden, AI is viable. And where it went on that peak at that top there, that peak of inflated expectation, of paranoia, of hype, was because the venture capitalists come in, they pump money in, governments like Petro just mentioned there, make grants available, and it's very viable. And so the whole ecosystem of AI is, becomes, very ripe. And what happened, I found a couple of years ago, is that the early adopters, some of the innovators, some of the companies that really wanted to lead the pack started using elements of AI in their business, and not all of them succeeded. Some of them did it without fully communicating with their staff, and sometimes they went with technology that, where they really didn't have a proof of value, a proof of concept. They didn't have a business case, and what happened is it was gimmicky, it was tactical, not very strategic, and they fell into the third period there, the trough of disillusionment. And I have in my book examples of banks and others who, as I say, did things a bit early and a bit too tactically, and it failed. But they iterated, and they've used AI in other areas, for example, onboarding customers into their organizations. And where we're at, and this is the sort of a reality check here, in some instances, we can easily be, a few years away from reaching the real plateau of productivity. And that's really what we're aiming for in our organizations. This is an interesting chart because down the bottom on the left hand side you have the different industry sectors, and then across the top how those industry sectors are using AI in which department. So in my book I feature British Telecom, who are using AI for their service operations. It's helping them with predictive analytics, look at weather patterns, and they're able to say when the bad weather comes, broadband lines are affected, and we need to schedule X thousand engineers to be in their vans to go out and do the repairs. Unlike, scroll down to one from the bottom, retail, and then go across to marketing and sales, a brand like a hospitality or a retail brand like TGI Fridays might be using AI, as they are, with tools like Amperity to stitch together all the disparate data and to enable 4 million GDPR compliant clients or customers with really personalized information and a personalized service in the restaurants using AI. So the term I prefer to use is augmented intelligence, where a barrister, a teacher, a marketing professional, somebody in a restaurant has AI software to hand in different sorts of devices and has access to the insights that enable them not to dehumanize, but actually to be a human with, superhuman powers, because they have all of that data and all of those insights to hand. So a couple of statistics here: brands who've adopted it in their marketing, predicting a 37% reduction in cost and a 39% increase in revenues. And they're the two factors at play here. For some organizations, this is about cost reduction. For others, it's about improving their marketing and their sales, giving more personalized service, and being able to therefore increase their revenue. Few more examples here, and Petro gave some great examples too. So this might be conversational AI, and this might be a digital assistant, some kind of chatbot, and really it's about driving human-like conversations at scale whilst maintaining that real personalization. And that's what the AI is enabling us to actually do. Number of different tools out there on the market. I've had lots of CEOs I work with talk about it's a bit of a wild west out there. They don't know who to turn to. That's where working with Foundtech, we're able to enable companies to outsource that to us. We're able to, to pull all of this together and to, re-educate and upskill key people in the organization, as well as providing them with a platform to actually do it. But here's a tool, People AI. This could integrate in with your CRM package, like your Salesforce, but also your other email, Slack, project management tools like that. And it's using AI to zoom in and focus in on really saying to the salesperson, this is the best task, taking away the guesswork of, certainly in my 30-year career, a lot of guesswork in sales, in marketing, in public relations, and the AI is able to really turn that much more scientifically. Otter AI is a tool that a lot of organizations are using, and that's about recording in real time, organizing your material, getting AI assistants to book meetings for you, and effectively automating a lot of those manual tasks that, again, we've been doing in that way for many, many years. A few more case histories there. I span, we're sector agnostic, so we're in a number of different fields, also different disciplines. So the way I look at AI, either geographic segmentation, industry segmentation, like insurance, pharma, and so on, or job function segmentation, marketing, sales, HR. So here's an example in the insurance sector with Ageas, where using AI, you can submit a photograph as you're reporting an accident, and using computer vision and machine learning technology, it can look at that digital photograph of the damaged car and quickly estimate the repair cost. A bit like the example Petra gave with the in a house buying scenario. Lots of examples in retail. I'd say telecoms and retail are two of the sectors that are, really ahead in their usage of AI. So this is the example I briefly mentioned earlier, where once you've given the vendor permission to use your data, really they're then able to offer you a very personalized service. And a tool here is stitching all of that data together and no longer being very homogenous with segments of customers, but being very granular and saying, Anne is in her 50s. She comes into our restaurant twice a week. Her husband's vegan. She's got teenage daughters. And it's that level of personalization, which is freaky to some people, but actually is very, very powerful to other people. And if they are giving that data freely and with consent in return for getting a very personalized service, it's a win-win. Thinking of coming out of COVID-19 and how the hospitality sector is so badly hit, for me this would be a great usage of AI. It's about tripling productivity, it's accurate, it's reducing food waste, and it's basically AI enabling the restaurant to predict, based on analyzing customer data, weather, tourism predictions, up to a month and a half in advance, how many people are likely to dine in that restaurant. That's a powerful usage of it. I'm going to hand back briefly to Petro to talk through an example that their company has specifically in the legal environment as well.
So we've done various case studies and proof of values here at Fountech because we work with a number of industries. We're also industry agnostic, as Katie mentioned. So we work with people, we try to understand the problem. One of the offerings that we have is the proof of value exercises. So when you don't know where to begin in that journey of AI, you can come and have a chat with us. And what we'll do for you is that we'll step in and we'll analyze the industry, we'll analyze the current offerings, we'll see whether what it is that you want or what data you have and how it can be used in order to start that AI journey properly. And that is a good way of approaching the problem because nobody is trying to sell you a complete new solution that might, at the end of the day, not serve your purpose. We try to understand what the client wants and what the client needs. And in the case of the legal industry, someone approached wanting something about automation of documents, but after seeing the bigger picture, they now want further development and how would approach in doing that.
Thank you, Pedro. More examples on Fountech's website of those kinds of, ways in which they're supporting companies. So a lot of the time, I mean, my work spans being a keynote speaker, running training and workshops, but mostly it's about helping companies, in the consultancy. And one of the often questions I hear is, where do I start? Who do I turn to? So obviously, we have partnered with Foundtech, and, we want to be able to help you. But I wanted to give you a sense of how busy this landscape is. And some of the feedback I get is that this is a wild west. We don't know who to turn to. There are thousands of these tech disruptors out there. I mentioned I work for the all-party parliamentary group for a task force that's looking at the adoption of AI in enterprise. Down the bottom right there, the big innovation center is the secretariat that runs all of the APPGs, all-party parliamentary groups. And this is their research looking at a number of sectors here, and there's 1,000 there. You can see 1,000 AI companies, 35 AI hubs. That's probably doubled or tripled in the last year or so. But at a glance, you can just see there, based on my point earlier of the viability of it and the venture capital money that's gone into it. It's a busy space. In marketing alone, my book is about AI in marketing and sales. Again, you can see a number of different people underneath there. So you have major vendors. We have IBM Watson, Microsoft, with Azure, you have Adobe Sensei and many others. But often, people come to us because they need somebody independent, somebody affordable, and somebody that can really help them, with really coming up with solutions to a specific business case. And that's really what we need to think about when we're getting started. What is the strategy? How do I need to prepare? And actually, this is from the World Economic Forum, and I find this slide really reassuring. Like I mentioned, I have an MBA and years of experience as a consultant. Petro has the PhD, and he has the technical background here, and it's really important. But what you don't all need to do is go away and learn to code and need to have that deep knowledge of data science. What you need in terms of key skills going forward is the ability to problem solve and do critical thinking and have that emotional intelligence. And then you work with the AI, you work with people like Petro and his team to do that. And I think that's really important, because in time, and had this discussion yesterday on a podcast. I was interviewed by Microsoft for a podcast, and the actual technology itself will fall more into the background over the coming years. It's of the moment, it's highly topical, but we don't really care often how our smartphones work, how incredible things that we do and get benefit from work. We at the moment, in this peak, like I mentioned earlier, we want to hear all about it because it's new and exciting, but soon we'll just be leaving it to the experts like Petro to figure out how it actually works. So when you're considering your plan and the issues and how you move forward, this is the scorecard for success in my book. My book's just been translated into Chinese, Russian, Vietnamese, and Turkish, an interesting combination there. And like I mentioned, they're my words, but they are the case studies of some of the world's leading brains in this subject. And I pulled it all together. And, as a team, we're helping organizations with these factors. And you're giving yourself a score of 0 to 5 across these 10 areas in order to come up with, down the bottom there, under 20, and you're traditional. In the middle there, perhaps you're transitioning, and 35 to 50, you're transformational. You are starting to really explore these benefits. Truth be told, this could be a useful guide if you are thinking about the change that is impacted by a pandemic like COVID, or a future technology, another technology. And it's about mindset, it's about the board's support, senior management buy-in. 3 and 4 are really important. Petro talked about, that proof of value, that proof of concept. That's really crucial. We need to do experimentation, and we need to have a clear business case. We don't want to deploy this in a very tactical way. 5 is crucial because it's about interdepartmental collaboration and collaboration outside of your company, with your supply chain, potentially with your competitors, certainly with the regulator and your trade bodies, and so on. 6 is about talent, reskilling, hiring, outsourcing to people like us. 7 goes hand in hand really with mindset and with, really with collaboration as well. What's the culture of the organization? And then having that continuous culture of innovation and iteration and being agile. 9 is very close to my heart because it's an area that the APPG are really focused in on. Petro talked about, the EU approach and the funding. We are all having, despite COVID, despite Brexit, we are all having to think globally about dealing with major macro issues, avoiding robot warfare, avoiding huge job losses, collaborating around ethics and AI for good and equality. They are really, really important factors. And then the final one is that roadmap as well. So that's just a flavor of the approach we take to get you thinking not too tactically and just opening your shopping bag and buying AI because it's of the moment, but actually doing so in a very strategic way. So a few ideas for you to think about. Hopefully, Petro and I have given you food for thought, and we've given you examples and some clarification of what AI actually is. This could be a 2-year plan. This could be a 5-year plan. But I'm saying to you, go away for the next 6 months and think new behaviors that you need to instill in your organization. That might be, for example, a fortnightly Zoom with other departments where you're considering the impact of AI on the different departments and how it's impacting HR and sales and marketing and finance and so on. Having a watching brief, for example, on your industry and how it's impacted by these 4th generation technologies. Maybe going and researching some of the tools that Petro talked about. Ultimately, it is about a proof of concept, and we're well placed to actually help you with that. So don't bury your head in the sand. If you're in a sector that where some competitors are already using it, or clearly there are ways in which tasks can be automated and it's ripe for that kind of transformation, if you don't future proof yourself and change, you could be out of business in 5 years' time. And another thing I would say, and I'm 53, and it's easy to get to your 50s and be in your comfort zone. You need to learn. And I don't mean go and do a degree in data science. I mean be on a journey of curiosity and continuous learning, because that's the only way you're going to stay ahead. And it's fun. And you don't need to be a petrol head, to actually take advantage of this. You can be a business person who, by learning on these kinds of webinars, can get to grips with the terminology and can really start to consider how it can be used, within your organization. So on that note, thank you to Petro for an incredible presentation. We've got a really nice packed crowd here. Sometimes we would literally just unmute you all, but I think we've got too many people to do that. So I'm going to ask you initially to type some questions into the chat box there. Let's see the chat down the bottom of your screens, and I will pick on, we'll try and get through all of them, but I'll pick on certain questions, and Petro and I will do our best to actually answer those.